I raised 3 children on my own, buried my husband too young. But nothing hurt like being told I didn't.
My true story from Connecticut. You weren't invited. Go home, Grandma. Don't make this harder than it already is. Those were my daughter's exact words, sharp as glass, as she stood at the entrance of the high school auditorium, blocking my way with her perfectly manicured hand. I had taken the city bus, worn my best lavender cardigan,
on my own,
and even
buried my
pinned a
husband
little
too
brooch
young.
to my chest that said,
But
"Proud
nothing
Grandma."
hurt like being
But
told
I wasn't
didn't.
proud anymore. I was trembling. The usher at the door looked uncomfortable, caught between us, holding a clipboard with a list I was clearly not on. I didn't cry, not in front of them, but I did turn around and walk back down the concrete steps with a pain in my knees I hadn't felt in years. My name is Beverly King. I'm 78 years old. I live alone in a small one-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport. I used to be a seamstress. My hands still remember the feel of silk and lace. I raised 3 children after my husband died in a warehouse accident when I was only 38. I never remarried. I worked. I cooked. I went without new shoes so they could have uniforms for school. And now my daughter Cynthia tells me not to show up to her daughter's graduation. I wasn't always invisible. Cynthia used to cry in my lap, used to bring me lilacs from the yard. But somewhere between her divorce and her second marriage to that man with the Audi and the fake smile, she started treating me like a loose thread she was too embarrassed to snip off in public. I'd noticed the change. The birthday card stopped. Then the phone calls.
Children on my own,
Then came the
my
whispers
husband
when
too
I
young.
visited. The way her husband,
nothing hurt
Ron,
like being
would raise an
told I didn't.
eyebrow if I stayed too long, or how the grandkids suddenly had schedules that made it hard to visit. But nothing hurt quite like being turned away from that graduation. I walked home, slowly, past the ice cream truck, past the smiling teenagers in caps and gowns taking pictures with their families. I walked into my apartment and sat in my recliner without turning on the light. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I just watched the shadows crawl across the carpet. I don't think Cynthia expected me to fight back,
3 children
but
on
I
my
had
own,
raised
buried
children
my
through
husband too
storms,
young.
buried a husband,
But nothing
worked
hurt
until my
like
spine
being
curved
told I
like a
didn't.
question mark. I wasn't going to let silence be the final thing they remembered about me. They wanted quiet. I would give them quiet, but not the kind they were expecting. And that's how the plan began. The morning after the graduation, I made myself oatmeal. Not because I was hungry, but because routine was the only thing that steadied my hands. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spoon, thinking of everything I had swallowed over the years, my pride, my exhaustion, and lately, my voice.
I raised 3
But something
children on
shifted
my
in me
own,
that
buried
morning.
my husband too
I
young.
pulled out a dusty file
But
folder from the
nothing
closet.
hurt like being
Inside were
told
old
I didn't.
letters, receipts, birth certificates, even the tiny pink card from when Cynthia was born. It's a girl, written in loopy nurse handwriting. I stared at her name, the way I had once stared at her face in the hospital, full of awe and promise. She didn't become cruel overnight. Life changed her. Money made her sharp, marriage made her colder, and image, oh, that cursed obsession with image, made her mean. But I wasn't planning to fight her with anger. That's
I
what
raised
she'd
3
expect.
children on my
What
own,
she wouldn't
buried my
expect was
husband
for
too
me to
young.
start using my silence
But
as a
nothing
scalpel.
hurt like being
I started
told
small.
I didn't.
I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't send my usual Sunday casserole over with the neighbor's boy. Nothing. For 2 weeks, I vanished. And in that absence, something funny happened. Cynthia called. Once. Then again. She left a voicemail. Her voice was chipper, fake. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. I hope you're okay. Call me when you get this. I didn't call. That's when I knew the silence was working. It made her nervous, not
I
because
raised
she
3
missed me,
children
but
on my
because
own,
she couldn't
buried my
control the
husband too
narrative.
young.
If I wasn't clinging to
But
her like
nothing
a
hurt
wilted vine
like being
anymore,
told I didn't.
people might notice the distance. So I went further. I RSVP'd yes to the summer church fundraiser, but didn't show. I canceled my standing appointment with her hairdresser, the one she had referred me to as a favor. I skipped the grandkids' softball tournament. I became a ghost, one that haunted her through the whispers of our town. But this was just the beginning. Silence was my entry point. My real weapon was memory. You see, What Cynthia had forgotten was that I owned the house she
I
lived
raised
in.
3 children
When her
on my
first
own,
marriage fell
buried my
apart
husband
and
too
she was
young.
drowning in lawyer
But
fees,
nothing
I had
hurt
taken
like
money from my
being told
retirement,
I didn't.
every last dime, and bought the modest colonial house she now pranced around in like it was her prize. We had agreed, back then, that it would be our family home. I'd live in the little guest suite out back when I got older. We even joked about it over tea years ago, before her second husband came into the picture. That guest suite had been turned into Ron's gym, and I had been turned into an outsider. But the deed? The deed still had my name on it. And the taxes? Still
I
paid
raised
for
3
my checking
children
account.
on my own,
I
buried
called
my
my
husband
attorney,
too young.
Mr. Feldman,
But nothing
sweet as
hurt
ever,
like being
answered on
told
the
I
second
didn't.
ring. Beverly, he said, surprised. What can I do for you? I'd like to put the house up for sale, I said.
Come. Clear.
No emotion. There was a pause. Is everything all right with your daughter? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Everything's finally exactly how it should be. He didn't question me, just asked for the usual documents. I sent them the next morning via certified mail. Now here's where people might say I was cruel, that I was punishing my
I raised 3
grandchildren for their
children on
mother's
my
sins.
own, buried my
But let me
husband
tell you
too
something
young.
about children. They
But
seem more than
nothing
they
hurt
say.
like being
My
told
granddaughter,
I didn't.
the one who graduated, had hugged me tighter than usual the last time she saw me, months ago. She had slipped a folded note in my coat pocket that read, I wish you could sit next to me at graduation.
I love you, Grandma.
That note still lives in my Bible. So no, I wasn't hurting her. I was showing her how to survive. Because Cynthia needed to learn, publicly, quietly, permanently, that when you throw away the people who built you, you are tearing down your own foundation. The real twist?
I raised
I
3
didn't
children
sell
on
to
my
just
own,
anyone.
buried my husband
I
too
sold
young.
the house to a local nonprofit
nothing
that converts
hurt
family
like being
homes into
told I
community
didn't.
shelters for single mothers and their children. Poetic, isn't it? When Cynthia got the notice, she stormed into my apartment, the first time she'd come by in over a year. She looked wild. Her hair was perfect, but her mascara was smeared. She had forgotten how to be real. Are you insane? You're selling my house. Not your house, I said softly, standing by the sink. Never was. Her voice cracked. Where are we supposed to go? What about the kids?
I raised
I
3
tilted
children
my
on my
head.
own,
I
buried my
thought
husband
I
too
wasn't
young.
invited. She
But
opened her
nothing
mouth to
hurt
respond,
like being
then
told I
closed it
didn't.
again.
I didn't yell.
I didn't explain. I simply handed her the official letter from the nonprofit. It had their name, logo, mission statement, and a move-out deadline. 30 days. She left without saying goodbye. That night, I sat back in my chair, poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and watched the sun set behind the trees. I had done what I needed to do. And the silence? It was finally peaceful. The news spread faster than I thought it would.
I raised
Bridgeport
3
might not be a
children on
big
my
city,
own, buried
but
my
it has a
husband too
loud
young.
mouth. Especially
But
when a
nothing
woman like
hurt like
Cynthia,
being told I didn't.
manicured, rehearsed, always on display, suddenly has the rug pulled out from under her. I didn't tell a soul what I'd done. I didn't have to. Word got around on its own. First at church, then through the women at the beauty salon. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was getting sideways glances at the farmer's market, not judgmental, just curious. No one said it out loud, but everyone wanted to ask the same thing. Did Beverly really sell her daughter's house out from under her? Yes.
I
Yes,
raised
she
3
did.
children on my
But
own,
that wasn't
buried
what
my
mattered.
husband too young.
What mattered was how
But
Cynthia
nothing
responded.
hurt like being
She started
told I
calling
didn't.
again. First with rage, then desperation. Mom, we can't afford to move that fast. Can you at least give us more time? Mom, the kids are scared. You're punishing them, not me. Then came the guilt trips. You always said family was everything. Now you're tearing us apart. I listened. I really did. I let her speak every word. Then I'd respond with the same calm line every time. I'm sorry, Cynthia, but I'm no longer part of your performance. That's
raised
what it
3
was,
children
after
on my
all,
own,
a
buried
performance.
my husband too
A
young.
long, exhausting
But
show
nothing
where I
hurt
was
like
only
being
invited on
told I didn't.
stage when she needed the prop of a loving mother. I'd spent too many years as a quiet prop. Not anymore. Meanwhile, the nonprofit had already begun prepping the transition. A representative named Delia came to meet me for coffee, a sharp, kind woman in her 40s who smelled faintly of lavender and wore a pin that said, "Mothers deserve more." We're so grateful, Beverly, she said, holding both of my hands in hers. This will house 4 families.
I
That's
raised
4
3
women and their
children on my
kids who won't
own,
have to
buried
sleep
my
in their
husband
cars
too
this
young.
winter. I
But
smiled,
nothing hurt
tears
like
burning
being
at the
told
corners of
I
my
didn't.
eyes. It's not charity. It's justice. Delia nodded. Well, it's love, too. That word. Love. I had twisted myself inside out over the years to be a loving mother, believing it meant sacrifice, silence, swallowing pain so my children could thrive. But I had learned the hard way that real love includes truth, boundaries,
Dignity.
and sometimes even a locked door. Ron moved out first. Cynthia didn't say
I
it,
raised 3
but I
children
heard
on
it
my
from a mutual
own,
friend.
buried my husband
He
too
packed
young.
up and left with his gym
But
equipment,
nothing hurt
muttering
like
something
being
about how
told
this
I didn't.
family has too much drama. No goodbye. No fight. She was left behind for once. I saw her once during those final weeks. She drove past me as I walked home from the grocery store. She didn't wave, just looked straight ahead, jaw clenched. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. And she was finally being seen for who she'd become. But the one I thought about most was my granddaughter, Emma. She hadn't called, not once. I didn't blame her. I knew her mother was
I
probably
raised 3
controlling
children on
every
my own,
message,
buried
every
my
move.
husband too young.
But I couldn't help but wonder
But
what she
nothing
thought of me
hurt
now.
like being
Did
told
she
I
believe
didn't.
I had abandoned them? Did she hate me? Or did she remember that little note she'd slipped into my coat that day? The one that read, "I love you, Grandma." I kept it near me, folded inside my Bible, next to the passage in Proverbs about a woman of strength and dignity. 1 week before move-out day, there was a knock on my door. It was Emma, 17 years old, standing there in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes swollen from crying.
I raised
"Hi,"
3
she
children on
whispered.
my own,
I
buried
blinked
my
back
husband too
tears.
young.
"Hi, baby."
But nothing
"I'm sorry,"
hurt like
she
being
said,
told
her
I
voice cracking. I didn't know she did that to you. I didn't know she told you not to come." I pulled her inside and wrapped my arms around her. She smelled like vanilla and sadness. "It's okay," I whispered. "None of this is your fault." She sat on my couch and we talked for over an hour. She told me how Cynthia had spun a different story, that I had chosen not to come to the graduation, that I was angry about something small and had made a big deal out of nothing. "But I saw your
raised
name
3
wasn't on the
children
guest
my
list,"
own,
she said
buried my
quietly.
husband too young.
"And then I found the note I
But
gave you in the
nothing
trash.
hurt like being
She must
told
have
I
taken
didn't.
it from your coat somehow and thrown it away." That nearly broke me, but I smiled steady. She couldn't throw it away from my heart. Emma cried then. Real, shaking sobs. The kind only girls with too much pressure and not enough love cry. "I don't know who she is anymore," she said. "She's someone who forgot where she came from," I said. "But that doesn't mean you have to forget." I gave her a copy of the house listing with the nonprofit's mission statement. I told her why I
raised
did
3
it,
children on
not
my
to
own,
hurt,
buried my
but to
husband too
heal what had
young.
been twisted.
But
Emma
nothing
understood.
hurt like
And then
being
she
told
did
I
something
didn't.
I'll never forget. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were printed photos, me, holding her as a baby me, braiding her hair at age 5 me, clapping at her school play. She had gone through all the old albums. She had remembered me the way I deserved to be remembered. "This is for you," she said, "in case you ever feel invisible again." I held that envelope to my chest, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not from pain, but from pride.
I raised 3 children
the kind
on my
that doesn't
own,
need a
buried
chair
my
at a
husband too
ceremony.
young.
Just a hug from
But
someone
nothing
who sees your
hurt
soul.
like being told
The day
I
the
didn't.
family moved out, I stayed home. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. My part was already done. But that night, Emma texted me a picture. The front porch. Empty. And the caption. An empty house. "But I'm still full of you, Grandma." The house on Larkspur Avenue stood empty for exactly 5 days. Then, one Tuesday morning, a bright blue van pulled into the driveway. A group of women stepped out, mothers holding little hands, toddlers with
I
stuffed
raised 3
bears,
children
a
on my
baby
own,
strapped to
buried
a
my
young
husband
woman's
too
chest
young.
with a cloth wrap
But
faded at the
nothing
edges.
hurt like
They
being
looked
told
tired
I didn't.
and brave. I watched from across the street, behind my curtains, not like a spy, but like a gardener watching the first sprout break through dry ground. The nonprofit moved quickly. Fresh paint. A new mailbox. Cracks in the sidewalk patched. The lawn trimmed neatly. Within a week, it didn't look like Cynthia's house anymore. It looked like a place meant to begin again. I didn't visit. I didn't intrude. That house wasn't mine anymore, and that was the point. My apartment remained quiet, but not lonely. Emma began visiting every Saturday. Sometimes she brought tea and stories. Sometimes she brought silence, and we'd just sit together. Two women connected by blood and breakage. One afternoon, she showed up with a framed photo. "I want you to have this," she said. It was a picture of her in her graduation gown, standing outside the ceremony. No crowd, no stage, no fake smile. Just her, holding a homemade sign. "This one's for Grandma." My eyes stung. When was this taken? Right after Mom told me you weren't coming. I knew something wasn't right. I made the sign in the school bathroom with a Sharpie. Made the photographer take it. I touched the glass. "You've always had my heart, Emma. And now I have proof." We laughed. But not everything was light. Cynthia hadn't spoken to me since the move. She had started renting a townhouse in the next city over. Rumors said Ron tried coming back, but she'd changed the locks. The kids went with her, except for Emma, who, at 17, had begun spending more and more time with friends, with me, with anywhere that didn't reek of bitterness. I didn't celebrate her silence, but I didn't grieve it either. I had spent enough years grieving people who were still alive. Then one day a letter came, handwritten, no return address, just my name in familiar cursive. I sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking slightly. I opened it slowly, like an old wound. "Mom, I don't know if I'm writing this for me or for you. Maybe both. I was wrong. I've been wrong about so many things. About you, about what you gave up for me, about the way I treated you like an obligation instead of a gift.
I raised 3 children on my own,
I don't expect forgiveness,
buried my husband
but
too
I
young.
needed to say it. Emma
But
told me what
nothing
you
hurt
said,
like being
about the
told
house,
I didn't.
about healing what's been twisted. I used to think that strength meant control, but now I think maybe strength is doing the right thing, even if no one claps for you. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I see you now, Cynthia. I didn't cry, but I folded that letter, tucked it next to Emma's note and the graduation picture, and closed the Bible. 3 days later, I got a call from the nonprofit. "Miss Beverly, we're having an open house. Just something small to introduce the neighborhood to the
I
families
raised 3
and the
children
mission.
on my own,
Would you
buried
come?"
my husband too young.
I hesitated,
But
not
nothing
out of
hurt
fear,
like
but
being
because
told
I didn't want to
didn't.
be a symbol. I didn't want to be paraded like a savior. But then Delia added, "One of the moms asked about you. Said she heard a fierce grandma made this place possible. She said her son keeps pointing at the tree in the yard and saying he's going to build a tree house there someday." A tree house. My late husband always wanted to build one for our kids. We couldn't afford the lumber. I smiled. "I'll be there." The open house was quiet, simple. A few folding chairs, some
I
lemonade,
raised 3
a
children
tray of
on my
cookies.
own, buried my
The
husband
families
too
were
young.
shy, kind. One little
nothing
boy with a
hurt
buzz
like
cut
being
offered me a
told I didn't.
dandelion. I stood by the tree, sipping lemonade, when a voice behind me whispered, "You did good, Mom." I turned around.
Cynthia.
She looked tired.
Softer.
Older, though we were both already old in our own ways. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said. "I didn't expect to want to be," she replied. We stood in silence. Not heavy silence, the kind that leaves room for growth. She looked at the house, then at me. "Do they know what you
I
gave up?"
raised 3 children
"They don't
on my
need
own,
to,"
buried
I
my
said.
husband too young.
This isn't about me.
But
"But
nothing
it
hurt
is," she
like
whispered.
being told
"It's
I didn't.
always been." Then something happened I hadn't expected. She reached out, touched my hand. Not a grip, just a touch, a fragile thread of reconnection. I didn't pull away. We stood under the tree, the same one her daughter's future friend would build a dream in, and I thought about how revenge had never really been the goal. I hadn't wanted to destroy her. I'd only wanted her to stop erasing me. And now, maybe she wouldn't. Maybe. The revenge that whispers instead of
I raised
screams
3
can
children
still
on my
echo.
own, buried
The
my
following
husband
week,
too young.
Emma brought over a
But
small
nothing
journal.
hurt
"It's
like being
blank,"
told I
she
didn't.
said, placing it gently in my lap. "But I want you to fill it with anything. Your stories, your memories, even your recipes." I chuckled. Recipes.
She grinned.
Your banana bread changed my entire childhood. I ran my hand over the leather cover. It smelled new, like beginnings. I don't know if I have much left to say. Emma tilted her head. That's not true. You've just started saying what matters. So I started writing.
I raised three
a little
children
each
on
day.
my own, buried
Some
my
mornings I
husband
wrote
too
about
young.
raising 3 children in a
But
house
nothing
where the
hurt
heat worked
like being
only
told
when the
I
oven
didn't-
door was open. Some afternoons I wrote about the sound of my husband's laugh echoing off the porch before he left for work, and how that sound was never quite the same after his accident. But mostly I wrote about silence. Not the kind that fills a room with awkward tension, but the kind that blooms in your soul when you finally stop begging to be loved and instead begin loving yourself, quietly, fiercely, without apology. Cynthia began texting me once a week. Not long messages.
I raised 3 children
just
on
enough
my
to keep a
own,
thread
buried
going.
my husband too
Emma's
young.
doing great in school.
But nothing
I made your
hurt
meatloaf
like
tonight.
being told
The
I didn't.
boys loved it. I drove past the house today. The tree's still there. Sometimes I replied. Sometimes I didn't. But the thread was enough. One day, out of the blue, she asked if she could come to church with me. I said yes. She sat beside me in the pew like a woman trying to remember who she used to be. We didn't sing. We didn't speak. But when the pastor read from the book of Ruth, "Where you go, I will go," I saw her shoulders shake with quiet tears. After
I
the
raised 3
service,
children on my
we walked
own,
in the
buried
garden
my
behind the
husband too
chapel.
young.
Cynthia looked at
But
a rose
nothing
bush
hurt
and said,
like being told
"I used to
didn't.
hate these. You'd always make me water them. I thought you were just being bossy." "You needed structure," I said. She nodded. No one else gave me any. We didn't say it out loud, but the truth hung in the air between us. The world had failed her in some ways. And I had too. We were both flawed. But we were still standing. Cynthia reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Emma made me promise to give you this." It was another picture, a
I raised
Polaroid
3
this
children
time.
on my own,
The front
buried
porch
my
of the
husband
house
too
I
young.
once gave her.
But
Now
nothing
covered
hurt
in
like
hand-drawn
being
chalk
told I didn't.
messages. "Thank you, Miss Beverly. You saved us. God bless Grandma." Dozens of tiny signatures scribbled underneath. Childish handwriting. Crooked hearts. Rainbows. A stick figure holding a cane and smiling. I pressed the photo to my chest. That night, I tucked it into the journal. It was no longer blank. One page read, "I was not erased. I was rewritten. I was not forgotten. I was finally remembered the
I
right
raised
way."
3 children on
Weeks
my own,
passed,
buried my
but the
husband too
echoes
young.
of everything that had
But
happened
nothing
stayed
hurt
close,
like
like
being
a second
told I didn't.
heartbeat. Emma came by every Sunday now, like clockwork. We baked. We folded laundry. We watched reruns of her favorite childhood cartoons, and I pretended I didn't remember every line, even though I did. She always brought a new flower from the local stand, roses one week, sunflowers the next. Once, she brought lilies and said, "These remind me of you." Quiet, but impossible to ignore. I didn't need much anymore. My knees ached more
I
than they
raised
used
3
to,
children on
and
my
sometimes
own,
I
buried
forgot
my
where I put
husband
my
too young.
glasses. But for the
But
first time
nothing
in
hurt
years,
like
my
being
heart
told
didn't
I
feel
didn't.
heavy. That weight of being overlooked, of being tolerated instead of treasured, had finally lifted. But closure never comes all at once. It comes in whispers. And sometimes, it knocks on your door when you least expect it. One chilly October afternoon, just as the sun was dipping low behind the sycamores, there was a soft knock at my door. Not urgent, hesitant. When I opened it, Cynthia stood there, no makeup, no jewelry, no armor.
I
In
raised
her
3
hands,
children on my
a
own,
single brown
buried my
paper
husband
bag.
too young.
"I brought pie," she
But
said.
nothing hurt
I blinked.
like being told
"You
I didn't.
baked." She huffed a quiet laugh. "Don't insult me. Store-bought." But I thought maybe we could sit. I stepped aside without a word and motioned to the small kitchen table. She set the pie down and sat. It took her a moment to settle into the silence, but I waited. Finally, she looked up and said, "Emma told me what you wrote in your journal." I raised an eyebrow. She read it. Just the parts you let her. "She said you wrote that you weren't trying to hurt me. Just teach me."
I raised 3 children
nodded.
on my own,
That's
buried
true.
my husband too young.
I've thought about it a lot.
But nothing
About that
hurt
day
like
at graduation.
being told I didn't.
About the years before. About how I made you small in my life. Convenient. Her voice cracked. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. I'm not asking you to forget, Mom, but I want to remember better. Can we start from now? From the woman I'm trying to become? I reached out slowly and placed my wrinkled hand over hers. Starting from now is fine, but only if we carry the truth with us. She looked up, eyes red but clear. I can do that.
Three children on my
We
own,
sat like that
buried
for a
my
while.
husband too young.
Two women with decades
But
of
nothing
wounds between
hurt
them,
like being
finally
told I
willing to
didn't.
tend to each one. Later, after she left, I stood by the window and watched her car pull away. Emma had driven her, another small miracle I hadn't expected. The two of them talked through the open windows, laughing about something, and for the first time in a long time, I saw light between them. The house I gave away was only a few blocks from mine, and I sometimes walked past it when I went out for my evening strolls. But I never looked too long. I didn't want to haunt it. I wanted it to live. One evening, though, I paused at the edge of the sidewalk.
Buried my
A
husband
little
too
girl
young.
sat on the porch steps with
But
a notebook
nothing
in her
hurt
lap
like
and a
being
pencil in
told
her
I didn't.
hand. She had two braids and wore glittery sneakers. Her lips moved as she read aloud to herself, softly. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled and waved. Hi. Hi there, I called back. My name's Brielle, she said proudly. I'm writing a story about my mom. She's a hero.
She sounds like a good woman, I said.
She is. She said a nice grandma gave us this house because she loved people. My throat tightened.
I
That
raised
grandma
three
must have
children on
been
my
very
own,
lucky.
buried my husband
She
too
still lives
young.
around here. I'm
But
going to find her
nothing
one
hurt
day
like being
and
told
say
I didn't.
thank you. I smiled. I think she already knows. She returned to her notebook, legs swinging off the step, her pencil moving like it had a purpose. I turned and continued my walk, the breeze warm against my face despite the cooling season. Later that night, I added a line to my journal. Revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it just means rebuilding something where someone tried to tear you down. Emma read that entry aloud at a local storytelling night
I
held at the
raised
library.
three children on my
She
own,
stood in front of a
buried my
room of
husband too
strangers,
young.
young and old,
But nothing
and
hurt
read my
like
words with a
being
voice
told
that
I
shook
didn't.
at first, then steadied like a sail finding the wind. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one person clapped. Then another. Until the entire room was applauding. Not for me. Not really. But for every woman in that room who had been told she was too old, too quiet, too unimportant to matter. That applause felt like something had come full circle. And I, sitting in the back corner in my cardigan with a thermos of tea, felt more visible than I had
I
in
raised
years.
three children on
Because
my
I
own,
had taught them
buried my
something,
husband too young.
and no one could unteach it.
But nothing
The
hurt
winter came
like
early
being
that
told
year.
I didn't.
Snow dusted the sidewalks before Thanksgiving, and I found myself pulling out my old knitting basket again. My fingers aren't what they used to be, but the muscle memory is still there. Loop, wrap, pull through. A rhythm that quiets the mind. One afternoon, as I sat working on a scarf for Emma, I heard her voice in the hallway before I even saw her. And I swear, Grandma has a sixth sense. She knows when someone's pretending to be polite. Laughter followed. Two voices. Emma's
I
and
raised
Cynthia's.
three children on my
They
own,
stepped into my
buried my
apartment
husband
together,
too young.
like it was the most natural
But
thing in the
nothing
world.
hurt like being
Cynthia
told
held a
I
small
didn't.
plant in a ceramic pot. Lavender. The same flower she used to pick as a child. I've brought you something, she said. I thought your windowsill looked a little lonely. I took it from her hands and set it on the sill. It looks better now. We had tea that afternoon. All three of us. 3 generations of women who had loved each other imperfectly, broken each other carelessly, and still found their way back. At one point, Cynthia reached into her purse
I
and
raised
pulled
three
out a
children
small
on my
envelope.
own, buried my
This
husband
is for
too
you.
young.
Inside was a single
But nothing
photograph.
hurt like
The
being
house I
told
once
I
gave
didn't.
her. Taken just a week ago. Only now the front yard had something new, a treehouse. Crooked, handmade, clearly built with scrap wood and child-sized tools. Painted in messy splashes of color. On one wooden plank, scrawled in big blue letters. For all the grandmas who never got a chair. I felt my breath catch. Who painted that? Brielle, Cynthia said. One of the little girls living there now. She said she wanted every
I
grandma
raised
to
3
have a place
children
to
on my
sit.
own, buried my
Tears
husband
slipped down
too
my
young.
cheeks. I didn't
But
wipe them
nothing
away.
hurt
They
like being
belonged
told
there.
I didn't.
That night, when they left, I sat down and opened the journal again. And I wrote, "Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just takes root in a child's drawing, or a homemade sign, or a daughter's second chance." But the part of this story I haven't told yet is this. A week before Christmas, I got a call from a young woman named April. She was one of the mothers living in the house now. "Miss Beverly?" she asked, a bit nervous. "Yes. I wanted to say thank you.
Children on my
My
own,
son
buried
hasn't
my
had a
husband
bed
too
in
young.
3 months. But
But
last
nothing
night,
hurt
he
like
slept
being
through the whole
told
night
I didn't.
and told me this morning that this house smells like hugs." I had to press the phone to my chest for a second. When I brought it back to my ear, I said, "Tell him he gave me the best Christmas gift I've had in years."
We spoke for a while.
April told me about her dreams, finishing nursing school, giving her son a better life, maybe even volunteering with the nonprofit when she graduated. She asked me if I'd like to come visit sometime. I said I'd think about it. Truthfully, I already knew the answer. Because when someone gives you back your
raised 3
voice,
children
when a
on my
community
own,
turns your
buried my
pain
husband
into
too
shelter,
young.
when a treehouse
But
appears out
nothing
of
hurt
nowhere with
like
your
being
story
told
written on
I
the
didn't.
side, you don't stay hidden. You grow again. And sometimes you even bloom. The next week, I went back to the house. Emma walked beside me. Cynthia trailed behind, quiet but steady. The front door opened before we even reached the porch. Brielle came running out, arms wide, her little boots crunching in the frost. "You're the grandma," she squealed. "I knew you were real." I knelt down, knees cracking, and held out my arms. "I'm real,
I raised
sweetheart,"
3 children on
I
my
whispered,
own, buried
"and
my
I'm
husband
so
too
proud
young.
of you." She
But
hugged
nothing
me like
hurt
I
like
belonged
being
to her.
told I didn't.
And in that moment, I realized something. I did. I belonged to all of them. To the forgotten. To the silent. To the ones who never got a seat, but built their own table instead. I was never erased. I was simply waiting to be rewritten on better pages, in brighter ink. The final snowfall of the year came gently, like a whispered apology from the sky. I stood at the window, watching flakes settle softly onto the lavender plant Cynthia had brought weeks earlier.
I
It had
raised 3
bloomed
children on
despite
my
the
own,
cold.
buried my
Stubborn.
husband too young.
Beautiful.
Alive.
But nothing hurt
Just like me,
being told
Emma
I
was
didn't.
curled up in the armchair, reading aloud from my journal. Her voice was low, steady. She didn't skip a single word. "Silence," she read, "is not surrender. It is choosing the storm you want to walk away from." She looked up. "That's my favorite line." I smiled. "It's mine too." We'd filled 2 journals by then. My memories, Emma's reflections, even a few pages from Cynthia, slowly opening up like a rose thawing in spring.
I raised 3 children
Stories
on my
of our
own,
family,
buried my
raw
husband
and
too
real.
young.
Not perfect,
But nothing
not
hurt
always pretty,
like being told
but
I didn't.
honest. Cynthia came by often now, never unannounced. She brought coffee, helped with groceries, sometimes sat at the table and just listened. We didn't pretend the past didn't happen. We just agreed to carry it gently. On Christmas Eve, there was a knock at my door. It was April, the young mother from the house I once owned. Behind her stood 3 other women and 5 children, all bundled in coats and scarves. One little boy held a sign made from cardboard and red crayon. "Thank
I
you,
raised
Grandma
3 children
Beverly."
on my own, buried
April
my
stepped
husband
forward,
too young.
her voice catching in
But
her throat.
nothing hurt
"We
like
made
being
something for
told
you."
I didn't.
She handed me a small box. Inside was a snow globe, handmade. Inside the glass was a tiny model of the house, their house. A crooked treehouse sat in the yard, and on the base were etched the words, "Your roots gave us a home." I couldn't speak. I could only hold it to my chest, trembling. Then Emma stepped forward and handed me one last gift, wrapped in plain paper, tied with a ribbon. Inside was a framed photo. Me, standing in front
I
of the
raised
house,
3 children
surrounded
on my
by
own,
children,
buried my
with
husband
Emma
too
on
young.
one side and Cynthia
But
on the
nothing
other.
hurt
It
like
wasn't
being told
posed.
I didn't.
It wasn't perfect, but it was us. "I want everyone to see who you are," Emma whispered.
Not just a grandma.
Not just a mother, but a woman who changed lives without ever raising her voice. That night, I sat by the fireplace with my hand over my heart, thinking about all the ways I'd been told to stay quiet over the years. And how, in the end, my silence had spoken louder than any scream. The world underestimates women like me. Women with gray
I
hair
raised 3
and
children
soft
on my
hands.
own, buried
Women
my
who are
husband
always
too young.
asked to give and never
But
taught how to
nothing
take
hurt
back.
like being
But I did take
told I
something
didn't.
back. I took back my worth, my name, my place. They told me I wasn't invited. So I gave them something unforgettable instead. A reminder that age does not mean weakness. That stillness is not absence. That even a whisper can shake the walls of a house that was built on selfishness. Now, when I walk through town, people stop me. Not to pity me, not to tell me I'm inspiring. They stop to say thank you. They say their mothers called them for the first time in months after hearing my story. They say they went to visit their grandmothers in nursing homes they've forgotten. They say, "You made me remember what matters." And that's all I ever wanted. I didn't need revenge to scream. I just needed it to echo. So, if you're listening now, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been turned away from a door that should have been open to you, let my story sit in your chest like a flame. And never forget, you don't have to shout to change the world. You just have to stand. If my story spoke to your heart, subscribe. And if you have a story like mine,
I raised three
of
children
love,
on my own,
of silence,
buried my husband
of
too
being
young.
stronger than they ever gave you
But
credit
nothing
for,
hurt
leave a
like
comment
being
below.
told I didn't.
I'll be listening. Always. Her true story from Connecticut broken heart old woman.